The coffee was bitter, but the secret behind it was far darker. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombar. Tell me where you're listening from. I love seeing our mystery circle grow. Your comments always bring these tales to life. Let's begin. If there's one thing guaranteed to wrinkle Nero Wolfe's brow more than a misplaced comma in the Gazette, it's an unfamiliar smell in his house. The brownstone breathes in rhythms of its own, beef stock simmering at 11, orchids breathing at noon, Wolfe's chair creaking exactly once every 10 minutes. It's a sanctum. So when a strange scent wandered in around 10:30 that morning, somewhere between roasted chicory and cheap perfume, it had the same effect as a fire alarm at a monastery. I was at my desk, pretending to work while deciding whether Fritz's latest batch of almond cookies warranted a second round, when the front bell rang. I gave it 2 beats, waiting to see if Wolfe would bellow, "Archie," from the office. He didn't. So I went. The woman on the stoop was dressed like she'd lost a bet with the weather. Brown trench, darker eyes, no hat. The perfume was still arguing with the smell of coffee on her hands. Her expression said urgent, her posture said careful. That combination meant one thing: trouble with good diction. "Mr. Goodwin?" she asked, voice like a question mark dipped in caffeine. "That's me," I said. "And you must be selling something that can't be sold over the phone." "I'm here for Mr. Wolfe," she said. "It's personal." "They always say that," I said, but stepped aside. "Come in before Fritz mistakes you for a delivery." She crossed the threshold like she was testing for traps. "Wolfe doesn't allow perfume in the office, claims it offends his sense of olfactory order." But she didn't know that yet. When I led her in, the air stiffened. Wolfe was in his chair, bulked behind his desk, looking as though he'd been carved there. He had the American Orchid Society bulletin in one hand and a cup of Montavilla blend in the other. His eyes lifted about 2 millimeters when we entered. "Mr. Wolfe," she said. "My name is Claudia Darnell. Please," Wolfe interrupted. "No introductions until Mr. Goodwin has satisfied himself that you will not faint, weep, or impose." "Impose," she repeated. "Upon my digestion," Wolfe said. "It is not yet noon." I caught her glance. Some people wilt under Wolfe's brand of hospitality. Claudia Darnell didn't. She perched on the edge of the red chair and said, "Then I'll be brief." Wolfe sighed. That meant she'd already earned 5 more minutes. "I work for the Grantham Coffee Company," she said. "We produce high-end blends. Yesterday morning, a sample roast we'd prepared for an exclusive buyer vanished from our test vault. Just gone. This morning, that same blend was served at a private cafe under another company's label." Wolfe set down the bulletin. That, in our world, was equivalent to a drum roll. "I see," he said. "Industrial theft. You have police." "Yes, but not discretion," she replied. "And this blend, Sable Nocturne, was the result of 4 years of work. The formula is known only to 5 people, including me. If word spreads that it's been compromised, the company could collapse." I studied her face. The sincerity looked practiced, but the worry wasn't. "And you came to us because you want Mr. Wolfe to brew justice." That earned me a side-eye from Wolfe. "Archie," he said, "spare me your metaphors. Miss Darnell, who authorized you to come?" "No one. Mr. Grantham would never allow it. He's temperamental." "Meaning proud," Wolfe said. Perhaps foolishly. Her lips tightened. "Yes." Wolfe leaned back, eyes closing halfway. That was his equivalent of pacing the floor. "You are aware, Miss Darnell, that I do not leave this house for trifles." "This isn't a trifle. It's sabotage." "Possibly," Wolfe murmured, "or marketing." He turned to me. "Archie, obtain the relevant details. Locations, personnel, schedules, and," his nose twitched, "open a window." Claudia glanced at me. then back at him. "Does this mean you'll take the case?" Wolfe closed his eyes fully. "I have not yet refused it," which, from Wolfe, was practically a handshake. She exhaled, a small release of victory and relief. "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe." He lifted a finger. "Do not thank me. I have yet to determine whether your problem concerns coffee or people. Mr. Goodwin will learn which." When she left, the air of the room changed again, as if the molecules had been restored to their original order. Wolfe resumed his reading. I lingered, waiting. Finally, without looking up, he said, "Archie, coffee is an art of proportion, balance, and concealment. So is deception. This bears watching." "Meaning you're interested?" "Meaning," he said, "someone has brewed mischief. I detest incompetence in both beverages and crimes." And with that, Nero Wolfe took a case, though, as usual, he'd claim later that he merely allowed it to steep. When Claudia Darnell left the brownstone, the scent of her perfume hung in the air like an unwelcome guest who'd mistaken the invitation. Wolfe's nose twitched twice before he surrendered to it, which for him was a concession bordering on athletic. I gave her 3 minutes to clear the block before heading back into the office with my notebook, a cup of coffee, and the faint satisfaction that something interesting had finally pried open Wolfe's morning routine. He was still in his chair, eyes half-lidded, fingers steepled in front of his chest. That posture meant the machinery upstairs was warming up. You could almost hear the gears turning if you listened hard enough, though I'd learned it was best not to interrupt, until the first puff of verbal smoke drifted out. "She's nervous," I said, "but not desperate. My guess, she's covering someone's tracks, not her own." "Your guesses," Wolfe said without opening his eyes, "are frequently a triumph of optimism over evidence." "Sit down." I sat. He finally looked up. "Miss Darnell spoke with deliberate economy. That is commendable. However, she omitted something." "Which part?" "The reason she came to me. She said the company couldn't afford the publicity. Sounds reason enough. Phooey. A public company guards its reputation. A private one guards its secrets. If the theft was internal, discretion would be futile. The thief would already know the damage done." "So you think it's an inside job?" He sipped his coffee, grimaced, and set it down. "I think, Archie, that Miss Darnell is protecting someone she considers valuable, possibly indispensable, possibly herself. Find out which." I made a note. "Any specific instructions, or should I just go shake the tree and see what drops out?" "Restrain your arboreal impulses," he said. "Begin with the Grantham Coffee Company. Ascertain who had access to the formula and who benefits from its theft. You may start with Mr. Grantham himself. Assess whether he is temperamental or treacherous." "That narrows it down," I said. "Any preferences for how you want the beans ground?" "Coarsely," Wolfe murmured. And that was the signal that the audience was over. By 11, I was on Madison Avenue, heading toward the Grantham Coffee Company's headquarters. The building was glass and steel, a far cry from the aroma-lined comfort of our kitchen. Inside, the air smelled faintly of roasted ambition. The receptionist wore a headset and a stare that could deflect bullets. I showed her my card. "Mr. Grantham available?" I asked. "Do you have an appointment?" "I do now," I said, and smiled the kind of smile that's been known to open doors, or at least confuse people long enough for me to walk through them. 10 minutes later, I was ushered into an office that looked like it had been furnished by a tax accountant with delusions of grandeur. Behind the desk sat Theodore Grantham, late 50s, expensive suit, hands that had never met a coffee grinder. He gave me a look that started at my shoes and climbed reluctantly. "You're from Nero Wolfe," he said, as if it were a diagnosis. I told Claudia I didn't want outside interference. "Lucky for you, she doesn't follow instructions," I said. "Mind if I sit?" He waved vaguely, so I took the chair opposite. "I understand you had a roast go missing," I said. He frowned. A blend. Yes, but it's being handled internally. Funny, that's what she said, right before she came to us. That earned me a flicker of interest. Claudia told you about the theft? Sure did. Even gave it a name. Sable Nocturne. Sounds more like a nightclub than a coffee. It's our flagship blend, he said tightly. A precise balance of Ethiopian and Sumatran beans, aged oak storage, and a proprietary roasting curve. 4 years of work. If it's been stolen, I cut in. Someone's already serving it under another label. His jaw set. Impossible. Unless one of your 5 insiders grew tired of loyalty. He stood and walked to the window. The skyline outside was a grey jumble, but he stared at it like he expected to find the thief hiding behind a billboard. There are only 4 others who know the formula. Claudia, my production head, Ralph Dieter, our quality chief, Madeline Horn, and an outside consultant, Leo Vance. I jotted them down. Consultant sounds slippery. What's his deal? Vance handles international sourcing. He's brilliant but volatile. Thinks rules are suggestions. And the others? Dieter's been with me 20 years. Loyal to a fault. Madeline's precise, maybe too much so. She and Claudia don't see eye to eye. That's convenient, I said. A rivalry makes good cover. He turned, glaring. This company has been my life, Mr. Goodwin. I won't have you implying that my people are criminals. Fine, I said. Then let's call them potential saints with access. He didn't appreciate the humor, but he gave me their addresses anyway. By the time I left, I had a notebook full of names, a hunch about Claudia's nervousness, and a mild craving for coffee strong enough to dissolve concrete. The first stop was Ralph Dieter. His office was 2 floors down, walls plastered with roast curves, graphs, and the kind of spreadsheets that make mathematicians weep. Dieter was tall, thin, and smelled faintly of smoke. Actual roasting smoke, not cigarettes. He shook my hand with suspicion. Claudia sent you. Wolfe sent me, I said. I'm just the legs. Then tell Wolfe the formula's secure. I've checked every record. No leaks. Records can lie, I said. People too, he bristled. Not here. We run like clockwork. Every clock breaks eventually. That didn't win me a fan club, so I asked a few more questions, took a tour of the roasting lab, and noticed something interesting. A small vial on his shelf labeled Nocturne, Trial 3B. It was half full. Souvenir? I asked. Reference sample, he said. We keep them for calibration. I filed that away and thanked him. Next stop. Madeline Horn. Madeline's lab was all chrome and precision. She was in a lab coat, measuring acidity with the focus of a surgeon. You're Archibald Goodwin, she said without looking up. Claudia mentioned you might snoop. She was right. How's business? She set down the pipette and gave me a thin smile. Tense. Someone's stolen our pride and joy, and Mr. Grantham is pretending it's still ours. Meanwhile, Claudia's been oddly defensive. Defensive how? She's been taking private calls, locking her office, and... She hesitated, eyes narrowing. She changed the safe combination last week, without telling Ralph. That was worth noting. Any idea why? She claimed it was for security reasons, but she's been jumpy ever since Leo Vance returned from Brazil. Vance? The consultant? She nodded. He handles our bean contracts. Charming, reckless, and probably broke. He and Claudia were close. Once. Now we were getting somewhere. By the time I left the lab, the pattern was shaping up like a half-drawn blueprint. A stolen formula, a divided team, and a consultant with the morals of a mosquito. At 4:30, I was back at the brownstone. Wolfe was, predictably, still seated where I'd left him, like a mountain that disapproved of erosion. I laid out the facts while Fritz served beer and cheese. When I finished, Wolfe's only movement was a single raised eyebrow. Theft among collaborators. Predictable. The difficulty lies not in identifying who could, but who dared. Dieter has samples. Madeline has gossip. Claudia's got secrets, and Vance hasn't shown his face yet. Then, Wolfe said, show me his face. Meaning you want me to find him. Find him, Wolfe said, and determine whether his debts exceed his scruples. Money is the yeast of betrayal. I nodded, finishing my beer. As I stood to leave, Wolfe added almost idly, "And Archie, secure the kitchen when you return. Fritz reported a missing jar of Jamaican Blue blend this afternoon. I dislike coincidences." That stopped me cold. In Wolfe's world, nothing disappeared without cause, and if the brownstone itself had been touched, then this wasn't just a case of stolen coffee. Someone had crossed the line into Wolfe's sanctuary. And that, as anyone familiar with the man could tell you, was a cardinal sin. I didn't waste time. When Wolfe says someone's trespassed into his domain, you don't pause to admire the drama. You start checking the locks. By the time I hit the kitchen, Fritz was pacing like a monk who'd misplaced his rosary. "Archie," he said, waving a dish towel. "The jar. Gone. The Blue Mountain. I opened the cabinet, and it was not there." His accent thickened under stress, vowels rolling like marbles on tile. I crouched by the cabinet, checking for signs of tampering. The rest of the jars were lined up with military precision. Sumatra, Kona, Ethiopian Yirgacheffe, all neatly labeled in Wolfe's handwriting. Only one space was empty, like a missing tooth. "You sure you didn't move it?" I asked. "Of course not. That coffee was for Mr. Wolfe's afternoon brew next week. He said it must not be touched until then." That, right there, was the detail that turned a theft into an insult. Wolfe planned his indulgences the way other men plan invasions. The Blue Mountain was his rare treat, a good, small luxury in a life otherwise dominated by order and orchids. I straightened. "Fritz, when did you last see it?" "Yesterday morning. I was polishing the tins and it was there. This afternoon, gone. And no one came into the kitchen." He shook his head firmly. "No one except delivery boy for vegetables. And you, earlier." That made it worse. Whoever had taken it hadn't just slipped past Fritz. They'd done it inside Wolfe's fortress. I made my way back upstairs, knocked on Wolfe's office door, and entered. He looked up from his book as if I'd interrupted a religious rite. "Well?" he said. "Fritz confirms the Blue Mountain is missing. No sign of forced entry. Whoever did it knew the layout." He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Then we are not dealing with a simple burglar. Someone entered my house, Archie. That suggests intent, either to warn, to provoke, or to demonstrate access." "Could be coincidence," I said, though I didn't believe it. "A housekeeper's slip, delivery mix-up." "Pooh," Wolfe said sharply. "Coincidence is the refuge of the indolent mind. You will determine who entered this house and why." I'd been expecting that. "And Vance?" "Attend to him first," Wolfe said. "If this disappearance is connected, it will align in due course. If not, I will still have my coffee." Which was Wolfe's way of saying both problems were now my responsibility. I headed out again into the October dusk, the air cool enough to keep me sharp. Grantham's consultant, Leo Vance, lived downtown in a converted warehouse that had been turned into apartments for people who liked the illusion of poverty with the comfort of money. His door was half open when I got there, which didn't bode well for his sense of security or his survival instincts. I knocked anyway. No answer. Inside, the place looked like a cafe explosion. Bags of beans, half-open crates, papers everywhere. On the counter, a French press sat beside a cup still half full of coffee, steam long gone. I took a cautious look around, trying not to disturb anything. The desk was worse. Scattered notes, invoices from South American exporters, and a half-torn envelope from the Grantham Coffee Company. Inside was a check stub, last payment made 2 weeks ago, but what caught my eye was a smaller slip of paper tucked under it. Sable Nocturne. Shipment sample, Harbour Street Cafe, Tuesday 10 p.m. That was tonight. I pocketed the slip and took another slow look around. No signs of forced entry, but the window latch was cracked, possibly pried. Someone else had been here before me. I made it back to the brownstone by 8. Wolfe was where I'd left him, surrounded by silence and orchids. When I told him about the note, his expression darkened. "So," he said, "the stolen blend reappears tonight. Convenient." "Too convenient," I said. "If it's really our missing roast, someone's flaunting it." "Indeed. Go, Archie. Attend this display, but do not interfere. Observe. A man who boasts of theft soon reveals his accomplice." "Understood," I said, grabbing my coat. "Any requests?" "Only that you refrain from melodrama," he said, closing his eyes. "And Archie, should you smell the Blue Mountain, you will inform me immediately." At 10 sharp, I parked across from the Harbour Street Cafe, a sleek little joint where espresso machines cost more than cars. Through the front window, I could see the event in progress. A tasting party, maybe a dozen guests seated at tables, cups arranged in ritual precision. At the head of the table stood Leo Vance, very much alive and looking like a man who'd bet everything on charm and lost half already. He was holding court, explaining roast profiles to a crowd of boutique roasters and critics. I slipped inside, found a corner seat, and listened. "This," Vance was saying, "is Sable Nocturne, the finest roast produced this side of the equator, exclusive to our new brand partnership." Someone laughed. "You mean exclusive until Grantham sues?" He grinned. "Business is competition. Innovation can't wait for consent." The audience murmured, but they drank. I signaled the waiter for a sample and caught the aroma, dark, smooth, with a sharp edge of citrus. It was the same profile Claudia had described. Vance noticed me then. His eyes flickered recognition, but he kept smiling. "Gentlemen," he said, "if you'll excuse me, I see an old friend." He walked over. "Goodwin, right? Wolfe's man." "Sometimes," I said. "Depends who's asking." He chuckled softly. "You came for the show. Tell Wolfe the coffee's mine now. Fair trade." "Fair. You stole the formula." "I perfected it," he said. "Grantham didn't understand half the chemistry. Claudia helped me refine it. She's the artist, I'm the architect." That landed like a stone in my gut. Claudia? His partner. Before I could press him, a crash erupted from the kitchen. Shouts followed. Vance went pale. "Excuse me," he muttered, and bolted toward the back. I followed fast, weaving through startled guests. In the kitchen, a rear door stood open to the alley. Vance was gone. On the floor, a coffee tin lay dented, its label torn. Sable Nocturne. I crouched to pick it up and noticed something glimmering beneath the counter, a small glass jar with a faded label. Jamaican Blue. The same kind Wolfe had lost. I wrapped it in my handkerchief, heart thumping. Whoever had breached the brownstone hadn't just stolen a trophy, they'd planted a message. And now Wolfe's world, like his coffee, was beginning to darken with purpose. When I got back to the brownstone, it was past midnight and raining the way New York likes to, diagonally, with intent. I hung my coat on the rack and headed straight for Wolfe's office. He was still awake, which meant he'd been waiting. Not something he does for anyone less significant than Julius Caesar or a perfectly cooked shad roe. The light from the green lamp cast long shadows across his desk, where a fresh cup of beer sat untouched. He looked up as I entered, eyes narrowing at the damp trail I was leaving on the carpet. "Archie," he said evenly, "you appear unscathed, though drenched. I presume you bring tidings rather than pneumonia." I bring both, but you'll want the former. I pulled the handkerchief from my pocket and unwrapped it carefully. The glass jar gleamed faintly under the lamplight. Found this at the Harbour Street Cafe. Same label, same handwriting as Fritz's set, your Blue Mountain. He stared at it without moving for a moment, then leaned forward slightly, which for Wolfe counted as a gasp of shock. So, he murmured, our thief is not content with insolence. He is theatrical. That's one word, I said, taking a seat. Vance was there, alive and caffeinated, hosting a tasting event featuring your client's missing blend, Sa Sable Nocturne. Claims it's his creation, perfected with Claudia Darnell's help. Wolfe's nostrils flared just enough to signal deep disapproval. She was his collaborator then, perhaps more than that. Yeah, from what I gathered, they were close once. Madeline Horn hinted at the same. Looks like Claudia's been keeping her romantic life as well blended as her beans. He grimaced. Spare me the vulgarities, Archie. Proceed. Right. Midway through the show, there was a commotion in the kitchen. Vance bolted out the back door. When I got there, the coffee tin was on the floor and this little relic, I gestured to the jar, was sitting under the counter like an invitation. Wolfe considered that, fingertips pressed together. An invitation, yes, or a message. Someone entered this house, stole what was mine, and placed it there to demonstrate reach. That is insolence of a high order, and therefore dangerous. Agreed. But who? Claudia's the obvious link. She's got access, motive, and nerves. But planting something in your kitchen seems a little too suicidal, even for love or ambition. Not if she wished to shift suspicion, Wolfe said softly. If Vance placed it himself, he sought to warn me or taunt me. If Claudia did, she sought to incriminate him or exonerate herself. Then I'll need to find out which, I said. Vance is on the run, probably hiding or planning his next move. I can check his apartment again. No, Wolfe said, raising a finger. You will call Saul Panzer, quietly. Have him locate Mr. Vance, but not approach. I want to know who visits him. That was sensible. Saul could find a needle in a fog bank. And in the meantime? In the meantime, Wolfe said, you will visit Miss Darnell. She will either lie convincingly or falter poorly. Either will suffice. He leaned back, closing his eyes. Bring her here tomorrow afternoon. By then I expect to have clarity, and Fritz's equilibrium restored. I nodded, pocketed the empty jar, and headed upstairs to my room. The rain was still tapping against the windows like impatient fingers, and for once I envied Wolfe his immovability. By 10 the next morning, I was back at Grantham Coffee Company, waiting in the lobby while Claudia finished a meeting. She emerged looking tired but polished, the way people do when they've been sleeping next to worry. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me. Mr. Goodwin, did something happen? Several things, I said. Mind if we talk somewhere quiet? She led me into a small tasting room that smelled like roasted heaven. Once the door shut, I dropped the pleasantries. You were right, the blend's out in the open. Vance hosted a tasting last night. Claimed you helped him. She went still, the color draining from her face. He said what? Word for word. She's the artist, I'm the architect. Which sounds poetic if you don't know it's grand theft. She pressed a hand to her temple. I didn't help him, I swear. He asked for copies of the data months ago. I refused. He must have taken them from the vault. Funny thing, I said. Madeline mentioned you changed the vault combination last week. Care to explain? Her eyes flashed. For security. Ralph Dieter kept leaving it open. I didn't want anyone stumbling on confidential material. Like Vance? Exactly like him, she snapped. Then quieter. He called me yesterday. Wanted to meet. Said he had something important to show me. I refused. Where? The Harbour Street Cafe. That got my attention. He mentioned you at the tasting. Looks like he wanted you there for the performance. Her lips tightened. That arrogant fool. She hesitated, then said, "Mr. Goodwin, you have to understand, Vance isn't just reckless. He's vindictive. If he thought I betrayed him or told Grantham, he'd do something drastic." "Like break into Nero Wolfe's kitchen?" I asked. She blinked, startled. "What?" "Never mind," I said, standing. "You're coming to the brownstone this afternoon. Wolfe wants a word." "I can't," she protested. "Mr. Grantham, tell him you're meeting a client, or a lawyer, or your conscience. Take your pick." Her hesitation lasted half a breath. Then she nodded. "All right, this afternoon." I left her with instructions and called Saul from the curb. He answered on the second ring. "Panzer." "Saul, it's Archie. I need a quiet tale." "Leo Vance. Last seen heading east from Harbour Street last night around 10. Check his apartment and spread out from there." "Got it," Saul said. "Any limits?" "Don't talk to him, don't spook him, and if he orders coffee, I want to know what kind." By the time I got back to the brownstone, Fritz had restored his mood with pastry therapy, but the tension in the air was still palpable. Wolfe was in the plant rooms upstairs, his voice faintly audible as he lectured Theodore Horstman on some unfortunate fungus. When he came down around 3, he looked refreshed and dangerous, the combination that makes grown men reconsider their alibis. At precisely 4, the bell rang. Claudia arrived, pale but composed. I ushered her into the office. Wolfe greeted her with a nod that could have been carved in marble. "Miss Darnell," he said, "you have my sympathy. Betrayal is bitter, particularly when it's brewed from your own craft." She frowned. "If you think I was involved—" "I think," Wolfe interrupted, "that you were frightened, and that fright prompted actions you would not ordinarily take. Perhaps even an ill-advised visit." Her brows furrowed. "Visit. Last night someone entered this house and removed an item from my kitchen," he said softly. "That act, Miss Darnell, was both reckless and intimate." "Do you deny it?" She stared at him, lips parting in disbelief. "I know, I would never—" Her voice faltered. For a moment the mask slipped, revealing something raw beneath. "I believe you," Wolfe said finally. "But your denial confirms that you know who did." The silence that followed was taut as wire. Then Claudia whispered, "Leo. He must have." I watched Wolfe's eyes glint, just enough to tell me he'd already expected that. He leaned forward slightly. "Then, Miss Darnell, we must anticipate his next move, for he has already declared war, and wars, as you may know, are won by patience and position." She nodded faintly. Wolfe dismissed her, and I escorted her to the door. As it closed, Wolfe said, "Archie, Saul will call soon. When he does, be prepared to act. Our Mr. Vance has made his gambit. It is time we set the board." And just then, the phone rang. I crossed the room in 2 strides and picked up the phone. "Goodwin." "Saul," came the familiar, unhurried voice. "I've got him." I covered the mouthpiece and looked at Wolfe, who was watching me like a chess player who already knew which piece I'd move. "Go on," I said. "Vance checked into the Royal Regent Hotel on East 42nd under the name Mr. Langdon. Room 712. Been there since this morning. Had one visitor, male, mid-50s, grey suit, briefcase, stayed 20 minutes, left with a paper envelope. I tailed him to the Grantham Coffee Building. That perked me up faster than caffeine. Grantham himself? Didn't get close enough to see. He took the private elevator straight up. All right, hold your post, I said. If Vance leaves the hotel, follow him. Don't approach. Understood. Saul hung up with his usual economy. I turned to Wolfe, who had already resumed his favorite pose. Eyes half closed, fingers touching like he was weighing the moral gravity of the situation. Well, I said, looks like our boy's got corporate company. If that visitor was Grantham, then either he's buying back the stolen blend or making sure it stays buried. Wolfe let the sound linger, like a man savoring a scent. Mr. Grantham's temperament was brittle, not subtle. He would not deign to negotiate with a thief unless he were cornered or complicit. Could be both, I said. Vance had proof, leverage. Maybe the formula theft wasn't his idea. Maybe Grantham wanted plausible deniability while outsourcing the dirty work. Speculation, Wolfe said mildly, but plausible. Retrieve confirmation. You want me to pay Vance a visit? Not yet. I wish to see whether the serpent slithers twice. He poured himself a small measure of beer and took a contemplative sip. Archie, call Inspector Kramer. Inform him that I may soon have a case involving industrial espionage, though not yet a corpse. That will soothe his paranoia when we inevitably trespass on his jurisdiction. Comforting the police before we annoy them, thoughtful as always. Bah, it is self-preservation, Wolfe said and reached for the phone. While he spoke to Kramer in his usual blend of precision and condescension, I replayed the pieces in my head. Claudia Darnell, scared and loyal. Grantham, angry and cornered. Vance, brash and running on nerves. And somewhere in that triangle sat the missing Blue Mountain jar, like a warning left at the doorstep. When Wolfe hung up, I said, if Grantham is in on it, what's the play? Sell the blend to another buyer, frame Vance, and walk away clean. Or, Wolfe said, allow Vance to sell it, then expose him afterward, retrieving both profit and reputation. Greed has tears, Archie, like roasting temperatures. Some men prefer their crimes lightly done. I nodded, already reaching for my hat. I'll head to the Regent, see what Vance is cooking up. Exercise prudence, Wolfe said. If he feels cornered, he may lash out or confess. Either outcome must serve us. By the time I reached the hotel, the sky was darkening into that soft bruised color that means New York is about to shine for the night shift. I slipped through the lobby, gave the clerk a casual grin, and rode the elevator up to the 7th floor. Room 712 was halfway down the corridor. I knocked once. Light. No answer. Tried again, firmer, still nothing. I leaned close. No sound inside. Then, because habits saved my hide more than once, I crouched and checked the floor gap. Dim light. Someone home. I used my knuckle to tap twice more, louder this time. Finally, footsteps. The door cracked open just enough to reveal Leo Vance, looking like he hadn't slept or shaved in days. His once charming grin had curdled into a wary smirk. Well, if it isn't the loyal errand boy, he said. Wolfe send you to negotiate or gloat? Neither, I said. I'm here to listen. You might as well talk before the roof caves in. Laughed, short and humorless. That's the thing, Goodwin. It already has. He stepped back, waving me in. The room smelled like roasted beans and regret. Papers littered the desk again, along with an open suitcase half-packed. I noticed a stack of documents stamped Grantham Coffee Co. and a small glass vial of dark grounds labeled SN Prototype. You planning a trip? I asked. Not planning. Running. Grantham wants my head. Claudia's washing her hands of me, and Wolfe, well, Wolfe doesn't forgive insults, does he? Depends on the insult, I said. Stealing from his kitchen ranks high. That startled him. What? The Blue Mountain jar, I said. Showed up at the cafe last night. He frowned. I didn't put it there. Then who did? He shook his head slowly. You think I'd break into that fortress? No, but someone wanted Wolfe involved. Wanted him off balance. Maybe Grantham, maybe Claudia. She's smarter than she lets on. Or you're still protecting her. He gave a tired smile. Maybe. But she's not innocent, Goodwin. She changed that vault code for a reason. I didn't steal it. I copied it. With her key. She didn't even realize until it was too late. He rubbed his eyes. Grantham found out. He said he'd handle it quietly. I didn't realize he meant paying me off to disappear. Who was the man with the briefcase today? I asked. Vance looked up sharply. You know about that. Saul Panzer knows everything. Was it Grantham? Yes. He brought money, 25 grand, said it was severance for services rendered. Told me to get out of the country. I told him I'd think about it. And did you? He smiled faintly. I thought about doubling it. That's when the knock came at the door, hard, fast, and not polite. Vance froze, eyes darting. That's him, he whispered. He said he'd call first. He wouldn't just... The knock came again, louder. I moved toward the side wall out of sight of the peephole. Answer it, I said quietly, and keep your voice steady. Vance hesitated, then opened the door a crack. A figure in a dark overcoat shoved inside. Fast. I caught only a flash of silver before Vance stumbled backward. I lunged forward and grabbed the man's arm as he swung, metal glinting in his hand. The struggle lasted all of 2 seconds before the knife clattered to the carpet and the intruder bolted out the door, leaving a streak of spilled coffee grounds behind him. Vance was pale, trembling. He tried to kill me. Congratulations, I said, catching my breath. That means you're important again. I looked at the knife, ordinary kitchen make, the kind used for slicing pastry. The handle bore a faint engraving. GCC, Grantham Coffee Company, I muttered. Vance slumped onto the bed. He's cleaning up loose ends. Or someone wants it to look that way, I said. I picked up the phone and dialed Wolfe. He answered on the second ring. Report, he said. Vance nearly became yesterday's news. Someone just took a swing at him with a knife straight from Grantham's pantry. Wolfe exhaled audibly, which for him was the equivalent of a curse. Bring him here, Archie, at once. The masquerade has gone on long enough. Vance started to protest, but one look at my face shut him up. I got him moving, down the hall and into the cab waiting at the curb. As we rode through the city, he muttered, You think Wolfe can protect me? He can do better than that, I said. He can make sure the right person regrets trying to kill you. Wolfe was waiting when we arrived. The sight of Vance stepping into that sacred office drew a sound from him halfway between a sigh and a growl. Mr. Vance, he said, you've brewed a mess beyond your comprehension. Sit, speak carefully. From this moment forward, you're either a witness or bait. And the way he said bait told me we were about to set a trap worth the trouble. Vance hesitated on the threshold, the way a man does when he realizes he's about to walk into a cage. Only this one was lined with books, orchids, and Nero Wolfe's disapproval. Fritz appeared silently from the hall, taking Vance's dripping coat with the same expression he might use for contaminated evidence. Wolfe didn't move, didn't even glance up from the paper he was folding. His stillness had gravity. It pulled the truth toward him whether you wanted it to or not. Sit, he said finally. Archie, close the door. I did. Vance obeyed, sinking into the red leather chair like he was afraid it might judge him. Wolfe placed his paper aside and looked at him, slowly from shoes to scalp, as if measuring how much intellect had been wasted on bad judgment. You've been reckless, Wolfe said, and now you've been hunted. Tell us the truth or the police will hear the fiction. You may choose which you prefer. Vance licked his lips. Grantham hired me 3 years ago for overseas sourcing. I was supposed to get the best beans, negotiate contracts, find exclusives, but he wanted something beyond fair trade, something secret, a blend that couldn't be copied. I was to develop it with Claudia. When we perfected it, he said the company would be reborn. Wolfe's tone stayed mild, and yet the rebirth seems to have involved theft. Because he changed the deal, Vance snapped. Said he'd patent it under his name alone. I told Claudia we deserved credit. She begged me to stay quiet. Said we'd get our share later, But she was lying for him. I took a sample to prove it was mine, just one roast batch, intending to sell the formula to a partner in Brazil. Grantham found out. He threatened to ruin me. Then he offered money if I disappeared. Wolfe steepled his fingers. And when you refused, he sent a messenger with a knife? Vance swallowed hard. Yes. Or someone did. He doesn't handle dirty work himself. Wolfe turned his gaze on me. Archie, the knife? I set it on his desk, wrapped in a cloth. He unrolled it with 2 fingers, examining the engraved handle. His eyes flicked over the letters like a chess player noting a predictable move. This is too crude for Grantham, he said. He would not risk an item traceable to his own firm. No, our knife man was someone seeking to convince us of Grantham's guilt. That narrows it back to Claudia, I said. Or Madeline Horne. She had motive enough, professional jealousy, and maybe a chance to eliminate rivals in one blow. Indeed, Wolfe murmured. Miss Horne's precision might extend beyond acidity tests. But before we speculate further, Mr. Vance, who else knew you were meeting Grantham today? No one, Vance said quickly. At least I didn't tell anyone. Wolfe's eyebrows rose slightly. That is a distinction without reassurance. Someone followed him, or you, and that person sought to silence you before you could confess. He leaned back, eyes half closed. Archie, summon Miss Darnell and Mr. Grantham here at 9 tomorrow morning, and ask Saul to remain stationed near the Regent in case our assailant returns for his property. Vance stirred uneasily. You're not turning me over to the police? Not yet, Wolfe said. You are useful. A living target always is. Fritz brought in coffee, though the gesture carried more judgment than hospitality. Wolfe sipped his with ceremonial calm while Vance clutched his cup like a life-preserver. I stayed near the door, watching both men, the mountain and the mouse. When Wolfe finally spoke again, his voice had softened, which made it worse. Mr. Vance, you will remain here tonight. Archie will see that you are installed in the spare room. You will not leave it without my permission. Do you understand? Vance nodded mutely. Good, Wolfe said. Archie, ensure that he sleeps. Tomorrow we extract the poison from this brew. I led Vance upstairs, locked the guest room from the outside, and pocketed the key. He didn't argue, just collapsed onto the bed like a man too tired to fear. I checked the hall windows, then headed back down. Wolfe was still in his chair, gazing into the middle distance as though the wallpaper had started confessing. You think Grantham's innocent? I asked. Innocent of murder, perhaps. Not of arrogance or greed. But this, he gestured toward the knife, was impulsive. A scientist of malice he is not. Then who? Miss Darnell, he said quietly. Or someone acting in her defense. Perhaps she feared what Mr. Vance might reveal. Perhaps she feared him. That made sense, but Wolfe didn't like guesses. He liked proofs, and proofs meant performance. By the time dawn touched the city, Saul had phoned to report no movement at the Regent. Wolfe listened, grunted, and told him to return by 9. He didn't eat breakfast, which meant his mind was running too fast for his stomach. At 9 sharp, the bell rang. I admitted Claudia Darnell first. She looked brittle, her confidence worn thin. Grantham arrived 10 minutes later, red-faced and indignant, demanding to know why Wolfe had summoned him like a servant. Wolfe merely nodded toward the chairs. When they sat, Vance was brought down from the guest room. He paused when he saw Claudia, her face drained of color. Grantham's gaze snapped between them like a whip. Wolfe let the silence ferment until it was thick enough to chew. Then he said, Mr. Grantham, Miss Darnell, you're here because your company's blend has been stolen, your consultant attacked, and my kitchen violated. I intend to clarify all 3 matters simultaneously. Grantham schooled. You think we had anything to do with that lunatic stunt? I think, Wolfe said mildly, that you encouraged him, then sought to erase him, but the hand that wielded the knife was not yours. He turned his gaze to Claudia. She trembled under it. Miss Darnell, Mr. Vance claims you altered the vault combination after facilitating his theft, that you feared discovery and sought to destroy him. Shall I call Inspector Kramer to test that claim? She shook her head, voice breaking. I didn't try to kill him. I changed the code because I found out he'd copied it. I was trying to stop him, but the knife, I swear that wasn't me. Then who? Wolfe asked. She hesitated, then whispered, Madeline. She hated him. She said he was ruining us. Grantham slammed a fist on the armrest. Madeline Horn? Impossible. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Not impossible. She had access to your inventory, including this knife. She had motive and precision enough to stage an imitation of vengeance. Mr. Goodwin, call Miss Horn and invite her to join us. Tell her the tasting panel resumes. I went to the phone, already knowing Wolfe's plan. He didn't want a confession. He wanted proof, and he was about to brew it fresh. Madeline Horn arrived 20 minutes later, punctual and unaware that she was walking into a trap. I opened the door to find her in a tailored grey suit, her expression brisk, detached, more laboratory than living room. When I told her Wolfe wished to discuss the tasting, her eyebrows flicked up, but she followed me in without hesitation. That, in itself, told me plenty. Guilty people usually stall on the threshold. Inside, Wolfe hadn't moved a muscle. The others sat like a mismatched set of chess pieces. Grantham simmering, Claudia brittle, Vance pale and watchful. Wolfe looked up as I ushered Madeline into the room. Miss Horn, he said, thank you for coming. Please be seated. She gave him a polite nod. Mr. Wolfe, I was told this was urgent. If it concerns the blend, I've already provided everything relevant. Indeed, Wolfe said. And yet matters have grown noisier. Mr. Vance was nearly killed last night. Her composure wavered for the first time. Killed? Nearly, I said. Someone took a swing at him with a knife, one stamped with your company's initials. I placed the weapon on Wolfe's desk like a card in a high-stakes game. Her eyes flicked to it, and just for a second, something changed behind them. Not panic, but calculation. That's from our tasting room, she said finally. Anyone could have taken it. Not anyone, Wolfe said. It requires authorization to access those drawers. Yours, Miss Darnell's, and Mr. Dieter's. But only you, I believe, handle them daily. She bristled. You're suggesting I attacked Leo? That's absurd. I may dislike him, but I'm not violent. Dislike? Wolfe's tone sharpened just slightly. You were more emphatic yesterday, were you not, Archie? I nodded. She said he was ruining the company. Madeline turned to me, eyes flashing. I said he had ruined it by stealing our formula. There's a difference. Semantics are no refuge, Wolfe said. The theft required precision. The attack required access. You possess both, and most tellingly, the coffee jar taken from my kitchen, placed at the scene of the tasting, bore your fingerprints. She went white, then red. That's impossible. Not at all, Wolfe said calmly. I anticipated that our intruder would handle the jar without gloves. Mr. Goodwin dusted it last night. I leaned forward just enough to confirm Wolfe's fiction. There hadn't been any prints yet, but she didn't know that. Her reaction was what mattered. Madeline's voice trembled. You're lying. I've never even been in your house. Precisely, Wolfe said, which makes your knowledge of its kitchen rather inconvenient. The silence that followed was sharp enough to slice through the air. Grantham stared at her, disbelief giving way to anger. Claudia looked stricken. Vance's mouth curved into something close to relief. Madeline stood abruptly. I didn't attack him. I went to his apartment last night, yes, but to warn him. He was threatening to expose all of us. Said he had proof Grantham was funding illegal imports. I only wanted him to stop before he destroyed the company. When he laughed at me, I left. That's all. Illegal imports, I repeated. Wolfe's eyes flickered toward Grantham, whose color had deepened to the shade of bad claret. Interesting, Wolfe murmured. Would you care to respond, Mr. Grantham? Grantham glared at her. She's delirious. Our sourcing is clean, always has been. Clean, Madeline snapped. You ordered Vance to bribe suppliers in Colombia to fake origin labels. You said it was the only way to compete with European houses. That's enough, Grantham thundered, rising. This is slander. Sit down, Wolfe said. He didn't raise his voice, but the command landed like a blow. You will both remain silent until I have concluded. I do not conduct inquiries by volume. Grantham froze halfway out of the chair, then obeyed. Wolfe turned slightly toward me. Archie, please summon Inspector Kramer. That got a reaction from everyone. Claudia gasped, Vance stiffened, and Grantham's jaw clenched so hard I could hear the teeth grind. Wolfe continued, serene as an owl. I believe, he said, we now possess both motive and method. The theft of Sable Nocturne was intended not for profit, but concealment. Mr. Vance's betrayal threatened to expose fraudulent imports. Miss Horne, loyal to her employer but misguided in judgment, sought to silence him before he could destroy their shared livelihood. When she discovered he had gone public, she attempted to kill him, then staged the scene to implicate Mr. Grantham, or perhaps Miss Darnell. But her haste betrayed her. Madeline's voice cracked. You don't have proof? Wolfe's tone remained glacial. I have logic and a witness. Mr. Vance, if you please. Vance swallowed, then nodded. She was at my apartment last night. I didn't tell Goodwin before because I thought she'd been sent by Grantham. She brought a knife. Said she wanted to scare me into silence. When I pushed her away, she dropped it. She ran before I realized she'd left it behind. Madeline shook her head wildly, tears starting. He's lying. I doubt he's clever enough, Wolfe said. You, on the other hand, are too clever by half. As if on cue, the bell rang again, Kramer arriving with his bulldog stride and eternal cigar. Wolfe greeted him with the satisfaction of a man whose meal had arrived exactly on time. Inspector, he said smoothly, you'll find a confession forthcoming and a motive as rich as any roast. Kindly remove Miss Horne before she collapses on my carpet. Kramer looked at me. I nodded. Madeline covered her face, whispering something I couldn't hear as Kramer guided her out. When the door closed, Wolfe exhaled deeply. Phui. Women who act from misplaced loyalty are the ruin of order. Claudia burst into quiet tears. Vance just stared at the floor. Grantham looked like a man who'd bitten into a lemon and found a nail inside. I leaned against the desk. You sure about that, boss? No prints, no witnesses till now. I'm sure enough, Wolfe said. The confession will follow the logic as smoke follows flame. He turned toward the window, his voice soft but edged. Archie, tell Fritz to serve dinner. We have restored equilibrium, however bitter the taste. And with that, Nero Wolfe folded his hands again, the storm outside his walls finally spent, though I knew he'd never drink Blue Mountain again without remembering just how dark a roast ambition can make of a soul. Dinner that night had the mood of a courtroom after sentencing. Fritz served braised duck with orange glaze, but even the scent failed to soften the air. Claudia sat at the small dining table opposite Wolfe, her eyes fixed on her plate without tasting a bite. Vance, under my watchful eye, was quieter than usual, which for him meant borderline human. Grantham had refused Fritz's invitation and stormed out earlier, muttering about lawyers. That left the four of us, the aroma of duck and Wolfe's silence, which was somehow louder than any argument could have been. After a few minutes, Wolfe set down his fork with the care of a man sheathing a weapon. Miss Darnell, he said. "Your ordeal is concluded, though your company's is not. Mr. Grantham will soon face the scrutiny he so richly deserves. The police, in their ineffable zeal, will not ignore those accusations of illegal import practices. You may find yourself testifying." Claudia looked up, pale but steady. "I'll tell them everything I know. It's not much, but enough to clear my name." "Indeed," Wolfe said, his tone cooling, "and perhaps your conscience. You were foolish to trust either Mr. Grantham or Mr. Vance, though your naivety has served as partial mitigation." Vance bristled. "Now wait a minute." Wolfe cut him off with a flick of his hand. "Mr. Vance, you will refrain from speech until it improves your position. It has not yet." I hid a smirk behind my glass. Vance sank back in his chair, sulking. Wolfe turned to him again, eyes narrowing. "You will remain in New York until Inspector Kramer confirms your statements. Do not attempt travel. Should you abscond, I will ensure your next port of call involves bars. Iron ones." Vance swallowed hard. "Understood." Satisfied, Wolfe resumed his meal, which signaled the discussion was over. Claudia excused herself not long after, murmuring thanks, and I walked her to the door. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the pavement slick and shining under the street light. She paused on the steps. "Mr. Goodwin," she said softly, "does he ever forgive?" I thought about Wolfe, his rigid routines, his intolerance for betrayal, his grudging respect for honesty. "He doesn't forget," I said, "but sometimes that's close enough." She gave me a sad smile, nodded, and walked away into the mist. When I went back inside, Wolfe was in the office, refilling his glass of beer. The tension had drained from him, replaced by that smug, infuriating calm that always followed a solved case. I sat down, stretching out my legs. "So that's that," I said. "Madeline's charged, Grantham's sweating, Claudia's clear, and Vance gets a second chance at decency if he can recognize it." Wolfe grunted. A satisfactory resolution, though none of them are worth the beans they stole. "Still," I said, "it's a rare day when you save 3 reputations and a company while sitting in that chair." He eyed me over the rim of his glass. "Archie, I did not save reputations. I exposed pretenses. There is a distinction. People, like coffee, are valued not for purity, but for balance. Grantham sought profit, Horn sought loyalty, Vance sought credit. Each adulterated the blend until it became poison." "That's poetic," I said. "Want me to write it down for the Gazette?" "Spare me," he muttered. "Journalists are vultures who mistake decay for flavor." I leaned back, grinning. "You could have fooled me. You've been savoring this one all day." Wolfe didn't answer right away. He stared into his beer as if the foam was spelling something out. "I savor completion," he said finally. "Order restored. It is the only indulgence I allow myself. Even the best roast is ruined by haste." "Speaking of roasts," I said, "what about the Blue Mountain? Fritz ever find a replacement?" Wolfe's expression softened, just slightly. "He did, but I shall not drink it. Sentimental attachment." "Sentimental repulsion," he said. "The aroma now recalls deceit, intrusion, and human folly. I will not have such associations near my palate." I laughed. "You realize, don't you, that most people would call that dramatic?" "Most people," Wolfe said, settling deeper into his chair, "are content to consume corruption if it is properly seasoned. I am not." That ended the conversation. I left him there, surrounded by orchids and silence, while the city outside hummed back to its usual restlessness. Later, when I checked the front door locks, a ritual habit more comforting after nights like this, I found myself glancing toward the kitchen. Fritz had polished the coffee jars, leaving a perfect space where the Blue Mountain had once stood. Maybe Wolfe was right. Some things, once tainted, can't be reclaimed. but standing there, breathing in the faint residue of roasted air and peace restored, I had to admit, if every cup of justice left a taste that strong, it was no wonder the man drank it black. The following morning began like any other, on the surface. The orchids were misted, the paper delivered, and Fritz was humming faintly in the kitchen, which meant his equilibrium had officially returned. Wolfe was in the plant rooms upstairs, which was his equivalent of meditation. From experience, I knew better than to interrupt him before 11 unless the house was on fire or the police were at the door. So when the doorbell rang at precisely 10:27, I sighed, closed my notebook, and went to see which kind of disaster it was. The visitor turned out to be Inspector Kramer, his face wearing the same look men get when they're forced to compliment their rival. "Morning, Goodwin," he said. "Your boss in?" "He's pruning his orchids," I said. "If it's urgent, I can go fetch him. But if it's just thanks, I'll take those on his behalf." Kramer grunted. "Don't push your luck. I came to close the loop," the horn woman cracked last. "Knight signed a statement. Tried to claim she meant only to scare Vance, but that knife doesn't look like a love letter. The DA will run with attempted murder." "Sounds tidy," they said. "You should be happy." He scowled. "I'd be happier if Wolfe didn't keep showing up in my reports. And if every case that starts with him didn't end with me cleaning up his moral lecture." I grinned. "That's what you get for being in law enforcement instead of logic enforcement." Kramer's eyes narrowed. "Tell him not to make a habit of it. I don't like owing him." He paused, lowering his voice. "And Goodwin, tell him the feds might take an interest in Grantham's import records. That woman's confession stirred up more than coffee grounds. If they find anything ugly, his name's going to hit the papers." "Duly noted," I said. "Want me to brew you a cup for the road?" "God, no," he said, and stomped off down the steps. When Wolfe finally descended half an hour later, I relayed the message. He listened in silence, folding his napkin with deliberate precision before speaking. The federal involvement was inevitable. Grantham's deceit extended beyond mere labeling. His ambition will serve as fertilizer for bureaucracy. "Kramer said you're back in his paperwork," I added. "He's not thrilled." "Then he should improve his reasoning," Wolfe replied. "Success should not be punished simply because it exposes failure." I sat back, watching him reach for his beer. "So that's it then. Case closed, justice served, and the city safe for honest caffeine drinkers again?" "Pfui," he said. "The city will never be safe for honesty. But yes, our obligations are complete." For about 5 minutes, silence ruled the office. The only sound was the faint hiss from the radiator and the clink of glass as Wolfe set down his drink. I was halfway to standing when the phone rang. "Goodwin," I answered. A woman's voice, shaky, uncertain. "Mr. Goodwin, it's Claudia Darnell." I straightened. "Miss Darnell, I thought you'd be halfway through rebuilding your company." I tried," she said, "but something's wrong. I went in this morning and Mr. Grantham's office was sealed. The police are there. They said he—" She stopped. "He's dead." I didn't need Wolfe's hearing to catch the word. I glanced at him and he was already watching me, his eyes narrowing. "How?" I asked quietly. "They said it looked like poison," she whispered. "Coffee on his desk, half drunk. I thought you should know." I hung up and turned toward Wolfe. "Grantham's dead. Poisoned. In his own office." For a long moment, Wolfe didn't move. Then, with a low groan that sounded half like disbelief and half inevitability, he reached for the phone. "Get Saul," he said, "and then call Kramer. Tell him this time he may have my full cooperation." When I finished dialing, Wolfe rose from his chair, a rare event and never a good omen. He walked to the window and stared out into the weak morning light. "I'd hoped," he said slowly, "that the dregs of this matter were settled. But ambition is a stubborn weed. When pulled, it often leaves its roots behind. You think Horn didn't act alone? I asked. I think, Wolfe said, turning back to me, that someone ensured Mr. Grantham would not survive exposure. Miss Horn's confession was convenient. Too convenient. The death completes the circle. Suicide to escape scandal? Unlikely. Grantham's ego would outlive the apocalypse. No, this was brewed by another hand. I grabbed my coat. You want me to head over? Yes, he said. Attend the scene. Observe what the police overlook, which will be considerable. Bring back every detail, the cup, the residue, the witnesses. He paused, his tone lowering. And Archie, be discreet. The public will assume I'm finished with this affair. Let them. I nodded and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard him settle back into his chair, the sound of leather creaking like a closing argument. Outside, the city had shaken off the last of the rain, the air cool and sharp. I flagged a cab, and as we rolled toward Midtown, I couldn't shake Wolfe's words. Ambition was a weed, all right, and someone was tending the garden with poison. The Grantham Coffee Building was already cordoned off when I arrived. Uniforms stood on either side of the lobby doors, their expressions balancing irritation with curiosity, typical for a case that had suddenly outgrown its morning paperwork. Inside, the smell hit me first. Coffee, bitter and metallic, mixed with something that didn't belong in any blend. Poison and panic. Kramer was there, naturally. Cigar clamped in his teeth, his coat hanging open like he'd given up pretending to care about appearances. He spotted me before I said a word. Don't tell me, he growled. Wolfe sent you. You say that like it's contagious, I said. Mind if I take a look? He gestured toward the glass-walled office at the end of the corridor. Help yourself. Maybe you'll see what my men didn't. I'll even pretend I asked for it. The office was neat, unnervingly so. Grantham sat behind his desk, slumped slightly to the left, as if someone had pulled the plug mid-sentence. The half-empty coffee cup sat in front of him. A faint residue circled the rim, greenish-gray, wrong for milk, wrong for anything meant for human consumption. I leaned close, careful not to touch. The cup was heavy porcelain, branded with the company's logo. On the saucer lay a small spoon, untouched. No signs of a struggle, no spills. He'd drunk it willingly. Kramer followed me in, muttering. Tox report's not back yet, but the doc's betting on cyanide. Smells right for it. And before you ask, yes, the office door was locked from the inside when they found him. Window latch, too. Key still in his pocket. Suicide's too easy, I said. Maybe, Kramer said. But the man was about to lose his empire, his reputation, and probably his freedom. You tell me that's not motive enough to drink his own brew? I studied the rest of the desk. Papers neatly stacked, pen capped, a single envelope set aside with "Private" written in Grantham's hand. I pointed. You open that? Not yet, he said. We were waiting for the lab to photograph it first. Let me guess, I said. You'd rather Wolfe didn't see it before you do. He scowled. Wolfe's not here, is he? Which means this conversation never happened. That was my cue to look harder. I spotted a faint discoloration on the inside of Grantham's wrist, like a burn or a rash. Poison, yes, but contact before ingestion, maybe. That wasn't suicide. That was handling something he didn't expect to kill him. I jotted a note, then straightened. Who found him? His secretary, Kramer said. Claims she got here at 7:30, saw the light on, and called when he didn't answer. Place was locked. Maintenance broke in. She alone? Yeah, why? Because if Grantham brewed that coffee himself, the pot's still here. I looked around the small kitchenette behind the office glass partition. The percolator sat gleaming on the counter, freshly washed. Your men clean up after evidence now? I asked. Kramer frowned. That's how we found it. Someone scrubbed it spotless. Then it wasn't him, I said. The man was meticulous, not suicidal. He wouldn't wash dishes after dosing himself. Kramer's jaw tightened. You're sure about that? Sure enough that Wolfe will be too. I left the office before he could throw me out. On the way down the hall, I noticed Claudia standing by the elevator, pale and lost. She must have slipped past the tape with that combination of innocence and stubbornness that only clients can manage. They wouldn't tell me anything, she said. Was it poison? Yes, I said gently. But it wasn't his idea. Her eyes filled. Then who? That's what we're going to find out. Go home, Miss Darnell. Stay there. Someone's trying to bury this whole mess, and you're still part of the story. She nodded, then hesitated. Mr. Goodwin, last night, Grantham called me. He said he had something for me, something that would clear the company's name. He wanted to meet today. At what time? 10 o'clock. I looked at my watch. 10:30. Too late for him, maybe not for us. When I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting, a full pot of coffee untouched before him. Report, he said. I laid it all out. The residue, the washed pot, the locked room, Claudia's call. He listened without interruption, eyes half closed, hands resting on his stomach like a judge hearing a final appeal. When I finished, he nodded once. Excellent, Archie. The washing was not courtesy. It was insurance. Whoever poisoned Grantham knew the means would betray them. The lock was staged, the message intentional. Message? Yes. Suicide by coffee, a grotesque parody of his own sin. I poured myself a cup, ignoring the irony. So who's left? Horn's in custody. Vance swore off scheming. Claudia's scared stiff. Who benefits? None of them, Wolfe said quietly. The benefit lies in silence. Whoever killed Grantham wanted finality, an end to questions. But there is one question left unasked. Who could enter his office before dawn, prepare his ritual brew, and leave without a trace? I frowned. Someone who knew his habits. His secretary? Perhaps, Wolfe said. Or someone who shared those habits long enough to imitate them. Retrieve the personnel list for me, and have Saul check if Grantham's lawyer or his supplier visited recently. I started for the door, but he stopped me. Archie, he said, voice soft but sharp. When you return, bring a sample of that residue if Kramer hasn't swallowed it whole. I suspect the poison was not for Grantham alone. I stared. Meaning? He glanced toward the untouched coffee pot beside him. Meaning, Archie, that whoever brewed that cup was practicing for another. The air in the room felt suddenly smaller. Wolfe reached for his glass, his eyes fixed on the window where sunlight was beginning to creep through the curtains. Someone, he murmured, is perfecting their blend. The brownstone was quieter than usual that night. The city beyond the windows hummed faintly, muffled by October fog, and inside the air had that thick, electric stillness that always came before Wolfe decided to end a case. I'd just returned from Kramer's office, carrying a small sealed envelope and a vial labeled Sample 14B, Cyanide Trace. Wolfe was in his chair, the same position he'd held since I'd left 3 hours earlier, though judging by the empty bottle beside him, he'd been thinking productively. I set the items on his desk. From Kramer, the lab confirmed the poison, cyanide as expected. But there's a catch. The mix had an additive, ethyl vanillin, artificial flavoring, used in some coffee blends, not in Grantham's premium stock. Wolfe didn't open his eyes. So our poisoner disguised death with aroma. Ingenious. Odious, but ingenious. Saul called too, I said. Grantham's secretary, Ellen Moray, hasn't been seen since this morning. Her apartment's empty. No forwarding address. That got his attention. His eyes opened, glinting like dark marbles catching light. Ah, predictable. He tapped his fingertips together. Ellen Moray. Modest, efficient, invisible. The kind of woman men trust to remember their coffee the same way every morning. Tell me, Archie, did Kramer mention whether her prints were found on the office cup? On the handle and saucer, thought it made sense. She brewed it daily. Of course, Wolfe said. She always did. He stood, slowly, ponderously, but with intent. That sound of his chair creaking carried the same weight as a gun being cocked. Call Miss Darnell and Mr. Vance, he said. They are to come here at once and notify Inspector Kramer that if he wishes to conclude his investigation without embarrassment, he should arrive within the hour. By the time the three of them were gathered in the office, the brownstone felt smaller, tighter. Fritz stood guard in the doorway like a silent sentinel. Vance looked jittery, Claudia pale, Kramer suspicious as ever. Wolfe sat behind his desk, motionless except for one hand resting near the sample vial. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, I detest repetition, but as you have all demonstrated selective hearing, it is necessary. Mr. Grantham did not commit suicide. He was murdered by the same hand that orchestrated the theft of his formula, the attempted murder of Mr. Vance, and the desecration of my kitchen. Kramer grunted. You're saying this secretary did it? The one who's vanished? Wolfe's eyes half closed. Vanished, yes, but not yet escaped. He turned to Claudia. Miss Darnell, you mentioned earlier that Mr. Grantham planned to give you something that would clear the company's name. She nodded slowly. Yes, a file, I think. He said it would prove he'd been deceived about the import fraud. Indeed, Wolfe said. The file exists, but it never reached you because Ellen Morey removed it from his desk after poisoning him. She had, you see, been the true architect of Grantham's smuggling operation. An unassuming woman, ideal for falsifying invoices, redirecting shipments, maintaining 2 sets of ledgers. When Vance's theft drew scrutiny, she saw exposure coming. Grantham's panic threatened her, so she silenced him. Kramer's cigar froze halfway to his mouth. You've got proof of that. The proof, Wolfe said, is in the residue Archie retrieved. The cyanide was masked with ethyl vanillin, a flavoring agent found only in one particular roast at Grantham Coffee Company, House Blend Reserve. A blend reserved exclusively for executive use, prepared each morning by Ellen Morey. The poison was mixed in a batch made hours before Grantham's death, before the building opened. Claudia whispered. She must have known he'd drink it as soon as he arrived. Exactly, Wolfe said. She entered early, brewed his coffee, left his notes arranged neatly, and locked the door behind her using the duplicate key Grantham trusted her with. Then she erased her presence, washing the percolator to suggest he'd made it himself. A tidy performance, if not for one misstep. He pointed to the envelope I'd brought earlier. Inside that letter, Grantham wrote, Private. It is his confession of guilt regarding the smuggling, addressed to the district attorney. But the last line, written after he'd begun drinking, reads, Ellen was right. The blend hides everything. He meant the flavor concealed the poison, though he didn't yet realize it. But the phrase itself exposes her, only she would have used those exact words. The man quoted his killer without understanding it. Vance exhaled slowly, staring at the floor. Kramer muttered an oath and reached for the phone. Wolfe raised a hand. No need. Saul Panzer has already located Miss Morey on a bus to Baltimore. By now the police there will have her detained. Kramer scowled. You might have told me sooner. I prefer conclusions to interruptions, Wolfe said calmly. You may inform your superiors that the matter is settled. I will accept no further inquiries. Kramer left, muttering something about ulcers. Vance stood to follow, but Wolfe stopped him with a glance. Mr. Vance, your salvation is accidental. Do not mistake survival for vindication. Yes, sir, he said quietly, and left. Claudia lingered. Mr. Wolfe, she said softly, what happens to the company now? Sell it, Wolfe said. Let some honest man roast its future. The aroma of deceit lingers long after the beans are gone. When she was gone, too, the silence returned, thick and final. Wolfe sighed, easing back into his chair. "Archie, open the windows. This room reeks of corruption." I did, letting the cold night air roll in. He poured himself a fresh beer, lifted it with the faintest smirk. "The irony is exquisite," he said. "A man dies for drinking the one thing he understood best. His palate betrayed him more efficiently than any enemy." I nodded. "That's justice, Wolfe style. Bitter but clean." He raised an eyebrow. "Justice, Archie, is rarely clean. It is filtered, like coffee, through layers of deceit until only the essence remains. We merely ensure the final taste is honest." He drank. I shut the window. Outside, the city pulsed and moved, heedless as ever. Inside, order had been restored, and for Nero Wolfe, that was all that mattered. Dinner was at 8. 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 Dinner was at 8.